If someone damaged you on purpose, I want you to hear me clearly. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a moment of weakness. It was a decision, and decisions have meaning. A person who chooses to break you with intention isn't confused. They hate you deeply, and they want you to feel it. Now, the real question isn't about why they did it. The real question is, what will you do about it? When someone causes intentional harm, it reveals far more than just a moment of cruelty. It exposes a deeper psychological state, contempt. Contempt is not just anger or dislike. It's the belief that the other person is beneath consideration, unworthy of empathy, or even less than human. And once that belief takes root in someone's heart and mind, it becomes fertile ground for destructive behavior. People don't damage others intentionally, unless they've first stripped them of value in their internal framework. That's why intentional harm is one of the clearest signs of deep-seated hatred. To intentionally harm someone, a person must go through a process of mental justification. They don't just act. They rationalize the act beforehand. They tell themselves stories. They deserved it. They're weak. They'll never change. They brought this on themselves. These internal narratives are not innocent. They're weapons crafted in thought before they ever strike in reality. And what fuels these narratives is contempt, a cold dismissal of another person's dignity and worth. Anger might come and go, but contempt lingers. It festers. It builds a narrative of superiority in which the other person becomes a target for humiliation or destruction. This mindset is fundamentally dangerous because it severs the ties of human empathy. When you no longer see someone as worthy of compassion or understanding, it becomes far easier to justify doing them harm. That harm might be verbal, psychological, reputational, or even physical, but in every form, it is rooted in the same seed. The person has been devalued in the mind of the attacker. They are seen not just as flawed, but as deserving of pain. That is the logic of contempt. And here's what's most terrifying about it. It can be masked. Contempt doesn't always look like rage or open hostility. Sometimes it comes dressed as passive aggression, silence, sabotage, or false concern. A person who secretly loathes you might still smile to your face, but their actions will tell the truth. The manipulation, the subtle cruelty, the sabotage behind the scenes, those are signs of a deeper moral rot, because contempt doesn't always seek justice. It seeks destruction, and it doesn't necessarily want to be caught. It wants to harm while remaining untouchable. When someone has reached that place where they can willfully cause damage and still sleep at night, you're not dealing with a momentary lapse in judgment. You're dealing with a conscious decision to harm. And that decision doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's built on a foundation of contempt, layer by layer, thought by thought. By the time the damage is done, the person doing it has already convinced themselves that you deserve to be broken. Intentional harm is not a random event. It's a reflection of how someone truly sees you, or rather, how they don't. And once someone's contempt has reached that depth, it's a sign that you're not safe in their presence, because they've already decided you're not worth protecting. Manipulation is one of the most deceptive and damaging forms of betrayal, because it is rarely impulsive. It is carefully thought out, layered in false kindness or emotional games, and designed to benefit the manipulator at the expense of someone else's clarity, security, or trust. What makes manipulation so insidious is not just that it causes harm, but that it is often carried out under the illusion of connection, affection, or even loyalty. That illusion is the trap. Behind it lies premeditated betrayal, the choice to deceive someone for selfish gain, To manipulate someone is to treat them as a means rather than an end. It's to view their feelings, choices, and vulnerabilities not as things to respect, but as levers to pull. The manipulator studies your patterns. They listen not to understand, but to exploit. They observe what moves you, what makes you hesitate, what you fear losing, and then they construct a plan to push those emotional buttons. That kind of strategy is not accidental. It's calculated. It takes time, effort, and most importantly, a willingness to violate the moral boundary that separates influence from control. Manipulation starts small. It often begins with subtle distortions of reality, gaslighting, guilt-tripping, selective honesty, or emotionally loaded silence. The manipulator tests the waters, watching how far they can go. And if there's no resistance, if the target begins to doubt themselves, they go deeper. Each act builds on the last. The victim starts to lose their sense of independence. Decisions become harder. Self-trust erodes. And through it all, the manipulator maintains their mask of concern, love, friendship, or authority. That mask is essential. Without it, the manipulation would be obvious. But with it, the betrayal is hidden and therefore more devastating. The reason manipulation qualifies as betrayal is because it violates an unspoken agreement in human relationships. The expectation of honesty, or at the very least, transparency. When someone pretends to support you, while secretly steering you for their own advantage, they are breaking that bond, and they know it. They may justify it to themselves. I'm doing this for their own good, or they wouldn't understand if I told them the truth. But those are just excuses. Deep down, they understand that manipulation involves choice. It's not something that just happens. It requires intention, and that intention makes it personal. There's an arrogance in manipulation, a belief that the other person is too naive to notice, or too weak to resist. That arrogance is often what eventually exposes the manipulator. But by the time the truth comes out, damage has usually already been done. Trust is broken. The manipulated person is left questioning not just the manipulator's motives, but their own judgment. That internal fallout, the self-doubt, the guilt, the emotional confusion is often worse than the initial act. Manipulation at its core is a betrayal of reality. It replaces truth with control, respect with strategy, and intimacy with advantage. It is betrayal not just of another person's trust, but of the very idea that relationships should be based on mutual respect and truth. And when someone manipulates you, they are not just lying to you. They are deciding that your autonomy is theirs to you. When someone truly harbors ill intent toward you, they don't waste time attacking what's superficial. They go straight for the core, what you love, what you've built, what defines you. They target what you value most because they understand, either consciously or instinctively, that the greatest damage is done not by physical force, but by emotional precision. This is not a random act of cruelty. It's an intentional effort to unmake you from the inside out. And that's what makes it so destructive. People who act from hate or deep resentment know that, to hurt you effectively, they must strike at the things that give your life meaning. That could be your family, your career, your sense of purpose, your faith, or your self-respect. They look for what anchors you, and then they chip away at it. Not because it's easy, but because it's effective. It destabilizes you. It throws you into a state of doubt, confusion, or despair. And that's the goal. They don't want to just wound you. They want to unravel you. This kind of attack is often strategic and emotional. If you value loyalty, they betray you. If you value honesty, they lie convincingly. If you value reputation, they smear it. And often, they don't do it loudly. They operate in shadows, through whispers, small actions and subtle sabotage. They understand that if they can get to what you care about most, they don't need to scream or lash out. They just need to touch the right nerve. The psychological impact of this kind of targeting is profound. It forces you to question your own values. You may begin to wonder, why did I care so much? Was I too vulnerable? Should I stop trusting people? These are natural reactions, but they're also part of the damage. The attacker wants you to not only suffer the loss of what you love, they want you to lose your belief in loving anything at all. That's when they win. The most chilling part is that this tactic often comes from people who are or were close to you. Strangers don't usually have access to your most valued areas of life, but those who know you intimately, who have seen what you cherish, are in the perfect position to exploit it. That makes the betrayal even deeper. The pain isn't just about what was attacked. It's about who did the attacking and how well they knew what it would cost you. This reveals something sobering. When someone targets what you value most, it's not just an act of hatred. It's a calculated act of annihilation. It's an attempt to make you smaller, quieter, less trusting, less alive. It's not about the surface damage. It's about breaking your center. And so the recovery from this kind of harm isn't just about rebuilding what was taken. It's about reaffirming that what you value is still worth valuing. Even after someone tried to destroy it, after someone intentionally causes harm, the damage doesn't always end with the act itself. In many cases, what follows is even more insidious, a psychological campaign to distort your perception of what happened. This is where guilt and gaslighting come into play. The person who hurt you now tries to manipulate your understanding of the event, to shift blame, to rewrite the narrative, and to make you question your own emotions, instincts, and memories. This isn't just manipulation. It's a continuation of the attack through psychological warfare. Gaslighting is not a mistake, it's a strategy. The goal is to make you doubt your reality, to convince you that you misinterpreted, overreacted, or misunderstood what was done to you. This gives the person who harmed you a double victory. First, they cause the initial injury. Then they make you feel guilty for noticing it. They subtly, or sometimes overtly, suggest that your pain is irrational, that your boundaries were too rigid, that your response was unfair. And if they're skilled at it, you begin to internalize these messages. Guilt becomes the leash. You begin to walk back your anger. You hesitate to speak up. You wonder if maybe you really were too sensitive or demanding. The manipulator may even paint themselves as the victim, crying, apologizing in vague terms, or claiming you hurt them by holding them accountable. This reversal of roles is intentional. It protects their ego while keeping you emotionally off balance. The more unsure you are of your own judgment, the more control they maintain. This tactic is particularly effective because guilt is such a powerful emotion. It's tied to our desire to be good, to be fair, to be kind. And when someone weaponizes that desire against you, it can lead to self-silencing. You may feel ashamed for feeling hurt, embarrassed for speaking up, or even guilty for wanting distance from the person who harmed you. That confusion serves their purpose. It keeps you from taking meaningful action. At this stage, the original act of harm becomes harder to isolate, because now it's tangled in a web of conflicting emotions. You're no longer just dealing with the impact of what was done to you. You're now fighting against your own mind, trying to figure out whether you're even justified in feeling the way you do. That is the dark genius of gaslighting. It doesn't just alter your view of the person who hurts you. It alters your view of yourself. People who gaslight after causing harm aren't trying to fix what they broke. They're trying to avoid accountability. They would rather damage your perception than admit their guilt. They'd rather twist your truth than face their own. And so they create a false reality in which they are the misunderstood party and you are the irrational aggressor. Understanding this dynamic is crucial, because the moment you stop believing the lie is the moment their control begins to break. Guilt and gaslighting are designed to keep you silent, compliant, and confused. But clarity is the first step toward reclaiming your power. When someone truly hates you, their goal is rarely just to hurt you once and walk away. Often their deeper aim is to keep you broken. The act of damaging you may seem like the climax, but for someone driven by resentment or envy, your healing is what they fear most, because healing means recovery. It means resilience. It means the attack didn't work the way they hoped. And for a hater, that's not just disappointing, it's threatening. Hatred is fueled by a desire to see the target diminished. It isn't satisfied with a single wound. It wants lasting effects: insecurity, fear, withdrawal, self-doubt. So when you begin to pull yourself together, when you start reclaiming your voice or restoring your confidence, it disrupts the narrative the hater worked hard to create. They told themselves that you were weak, flawed, deserving of pain. Your healing challenges that idea. It exposes their motives. It shows that the damage they inflicted did not define you. And that is something they cannot tolerate. People who operate from hatred often thrive on control. They want the evidence of their power to linger in your life. If you heal, if you grow, if you shine in spite of them, that power vanishes. It makes their effort meaningless. It makes them irrelevant. And so they look for ways to reassert their influence. They may reappear under the guise of reconciliation. They may send subtle reminders of the past. They may try to provoke guilt or shame you into questioning your progress. These are not acts of concern. They are tactics to reopen wounds. But even more toxic is when they attempt to discredit your healing publicly or privately. They'll say you've changed in a negative way, that you've become cold, bitter, or ungrateful. In reality, you've simply become stronger and more guarded. But strength looks like defiance to someone who depended on your vulnerability. They might accuse you of running from the past when, in truth, you're rising above it. Because the hater's greatest fear is not your silence, it's your strength. This is why healing, in the presence of people who have harmed you, often triggers further attacks. It's not because you're doing something wrong, it's because you're doing something right. They wanted you to stay broken so that your identity would be shaped by their betrayal. But healing is your rebellion. It's the refusal to let pain have the last word. It's the act of taking your narrative back. People who hate you may never celebrate your growth. They may never apologize. They may never admit what they did. But your job is not to convince them of your worth. Your job is to become whole in spite of them. Because when you heal, you do more than recover. You reject the entire framework of their hatred. And that's the most powerful thing you can do. When you've been wronged deeply, intentionally, the natural impulse is to retaliate, to hit back, to expose, to make them feel what they made you feel. That urge is understandable, and in many ways it's a sign that your sense of justice is still alive. But there's a critical difference between seeking justice and seeking revenge. And it's in that space that your response must be shaped, not out of vengeance, but out of clarity, dignity, and truth. Vengeance feels like power in the moment. It promises relief. It whispers, they deserve this. And maybe they do. But when your actions are guided solely by the desire to make someone suffer, you become entangled in the very darkness that hurts you. You may win the battle, but you'll lose something much more important: your alignment with truth. Because once your energy shifts from healing to retaliation, the damage doesn't just stay with them, it begins to shape you. Responding honestly doesn't mean softening the truth. It doesn't mean pretending you weren't heard or dismissing the offense as something small. In fact, honesty demands precision. It requires that you name the damage clearly and refuse to sugarcoat the harm. But it also requires that you stop the cycle, that you don't let your response become a mirror of their behavior. Because when you choose truth over vengeance, you're not letting them win. You're refusing to lose yourself. One of the most difficult truths to accept is that not everyone will admit what they did. Some people will twist the story, minimize their actions, or disappear altogether. And you will be left with the weight of what happened and the responsibility of deciding what to do with it. In those moments, honesty is your anchor. Be honest about what happened. Be honest about how it changed you. But also be honest about what kind of person you want to become in response. It takes strength to speak the truth calmly. It takes maturity to set boundaries without cruelty. It takes courage to walk away without slamming the door. None of that feels satisfying in the short term, but it builds long-term integrity. And integrity is what allows you to look back without shame. You'll be able to say, "I didn't lie. I didn't stoop. I told the truth and let it stand." The truth is powerful. It doesn't need dramatics to make an impact. A quiet, grounded voice often hits harder than a loud, angry one. And when you respond with honesty, especially to those who tried to manipulate or silence you, it exposes them in a way vengeance never could. Because the truth is harder to argue with. It lingers. It reveals. And it allows you to walk away with your head held high. And in the end, your response is not just about them. It's about you. It's about who you choose to be in the face of betrayal, and whether you let the pain define your character or refine it. In the end, when someone intentionally harms you, manipulates your emotions, targets what you hold dear, and then tries to distort your reality with guilt and gaslighting, it is not just a sign of conflict. It is a declaration of deep contempt. These are not accidental wounds. They are precise attacks designed to break your spirit, to keep you from healing, and to redefine your identity around the pain they caused. But your response, rooted not in revenge, but in truth, is your power. When you choose to see clearly, to protect what you value, and to speak honestly without becoming what hurt you, you reclaim control. You prove that no amount of hatred can erase your dignity, and no betrayal can define your worth. The pain may have been intentional, but so can your recovery. And when you choose to rise without retaliating, to speak without venom, and to walk away without dragging the weight of their darkness behind you, you win a battle they never saw coming.